Prem, really good to meet you in person. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview. I want to start by asking a couple of questions about yourself and your background and your perspective on where you think the industry is at the moment. You've had a very long career at the intersection of technology and business transformation. What drew you to the role at Hitachi Digital Services, and what does the breadth of the wider Hitachi group give you beyond what you'd get at a pure play IT services organization?
First of all, thank you so much, Mark, for having me on this interview. Yes, it is indeed a lengthy career, and most of the time I've spent on technology itself, doing, and most of my life has been with service providers. A lot of my part of my career was with Cognizant. What drew me to Hitachi? It's a fantastic question. So one, of course, they were friends to start with. But then, as a company, as I started to understand Hitachi a bit more, Hitachi Digital Services is not like any other IT services company that I worked in the past or I know of. Hitachi Digital Services, you have the real opportunity to bring your IT services knowledge and apply it in an operational environment. We do work with our friend BUs like energy, like rail, connective industries, where you can actually see a line of code that you write impacting an elevator, an escalator, a train. So the the fact that that's the ecosystem in which you are, not just trying to learn business, but to actually be with the business where your code is going to run, is actually what brought me to Hitachi, and that's what the ecosystem gives me as well.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I'd be very keen to get your perspective on the industry as a whole. I think we're at an unusual inflection point in the technology cycle at the moment. AI has moved from the boardroom super rapidly into live deployment. But the confidence within organizations is a little uneven. How would you characterize where we are right now? And what are your clients telling you about their readiness?
That's a very interesting question. The reason why I say that is we are in a very specific moment at this time, but it's also a slightly uncomfortable moment. The reason why I say that is AI clearly has moved from boardroom conversations to a state where it's running in production in many organizations in some form, manner, shape. What's lacking though is the trust in that AI. Everywhere there is a level of guard that you need to apply to put it in. Everything looks correct, but then the notion of, hey, is it indeed correct, is a challenge every company is starting to deal with. And I think that's the moment that we are. Every company, again, is trying to define the accountability, the governance, the risk ownership. What if something goes wrong? You can't blame AI. And we'll talk more about it as we go through. You got to have a framework where you understand what went wrong and the ability to work with your customers to correct it, understand where liability sits. So, like I said, it's moved beyond boardroom. It's great. People are seeing value, but all of us are in a slightly uncomfortable position on a how do we navigate this and get to the next level?
No, great. And just want to build on some of the comments that you made there around how AI is maturing. First topic we're going to delve into is agentic AI. So let's go straight into that. There's a lot of noise in the market at the moment about agents, but there's not a huge amount of evidence of production scale deployment. Where's Hitachi genuinely operating agents today? In your own delivery operations, in your client environments, and what does it actually look like in practice?
Yeah, Mark. Again, you are right when you say that there's a lot of noise. And right now, if you think about it, there is little clarity. Now, everybody wants to go with the narrative that we've deployed agents in production and we're doing this. But I genuinely believe, like I said previously, there is this uncomfortable truth of how this in a scaled environment is going to look like. From a Hitachi standpoint, we've been very deliberate, right from the notion of defining what an agent is. We've got this architecture put together, we call it minimum viable agent, that defines um, clearly the difference between a chatbot or a basic chat application that you build using LLM as your intelligence engine to an agentic workflow to an actual AI agent that could autonomously act and behave like someone that you can talk to a digital employee, which becomes a part of your organization itself. So that's kind of the evolution. And we've been extremely deliberate about how each of these phases are. And within Hitachi, the way it looks like today is we've got chatbots in multiple places, built it on Copilot Studios that helps us talk to our knowledge bases, OneDrive, SharePoint, and so on and so forth. We've got agentic workflows integrated into our procurement, HR systems with a bot enabling us to talk, automatic ticket creations. We've got agents that are working in our IT operations, right? Now, have we got a digital employee yet? I don't think we have. We've not got to a level where it's integrated into our identity management system, where it's got a reporting line into an actual human. So the human becomes accountable for that agent's action, so on and so forth. So there is that maturity that needs to be done. And do we have it in every workflow, every operations? I don't think we have. So we've been very deliberate about where to deploy it, where to leverage it, and how to use it. While production deployment within Hitachi, especially Hitachi Digital Services, is real, I wouldn't claim it's dramatic and it's scaled to a point where we can thump our chests, right?
Okay, I just want to drill into that a little bit more. Getting an agent into proof of concept is one thing. Governing, scaling it across an enterprise is something quite different. What does your governance framework for agentic AI look like, and how do you give a risk adverse organization the confidence to move from pilot to production? How do you scale in a safe way?
When you think about how we've been approaching agentic AI, and I know I'd like to take you back a little bit into the journey itself, Mark, to answer this question, because that gives us a grounding on how we've been thinking about this. When the ChatGPT moment happened, which was sometime around November 2022, you started, sure, seeing a lot of companies come up with, hey, we know retrieval augmented generation. You can augment the knowledge of LLM and it'll reduce hallucination. It'll be specific to what you want, your business, your. We didn't go to market with any of those narratives because we were very clear that that part of it was going to be potentially commoditized heavily and being done by the LLMs themselves at some point in time. So, where we focused on was the biggest gap between a prototype and a productionable agent. And we define it in terms of R2O2.ai. That's the framework. And what it stands for is reliable, responsible, observable, and optimal AI. And we've always felt that's the gap between conceiving an idea, building a proof of concept on using an LLM, using a product, doesn't matter what, on an agent that does implement the idea, but then putting it in production and starting to think about accountability, usage, truth, like the groundedness, all of that. So R2O2 is our framework that governs any AI that we build right from the scratch. And in this new world of building agentic applications, that's as important as just the functionality that the agent is going to do. Now, with reliability and responsibility, there are two things that we look for. Now, it's not a typical hallucination control or is your answer correct or the confidence scores that we always want to attach to an agent response. So a human reading it knows where in the spectrum the answer is. But it also includes who the accountable owner for that agent is going to be. How do you understand what it tells is correct, and do you have the observability and auditability around it? When you think about responsible AI, one part of that is bias, toxicity, um, management, and stuff. But the other part of that is also the responsibility from an organizational standpoint on what the agent delivers as an action.
Mm-hmm.
So, who is that person? And we always look at the framework having a human accountable for where it's running and what it's doing. So that's kind of how we thought about R2O2, and then attach it with the last two O's, right, which is observable. So you need to have explainability and auditability across the stack. You need to know the thought process of an agent, why it did what it did, and that has to be auditable by anybody at any point in time. The final one being optimal, which is where a lot of problems people are seeing today is the agents go on a loop and they keep calling tools and they use so many tokens for a little task that you think was like, hey, I just wanted a small fix. So I asked it to, hey, yeah, all of this is right, just change this. And it just kept changing it for 10 hours. So how do you start to think about integrating that into management of the agent itself? So your optimality is maintained and you know what you spend for what it's doing, so that you can manage the spend over time and scale it. And we continue to believe R2O2 is the framework for scalability and governance.
Okay, given your experience, I'd be really interested to get your perspective and perception on where you think this is headed. Where do you think agentic AI will be in 2 years? 2 years time? Are we looking at sort of incremental evolution of automation, or is it going to be something much more structurally disruptive and transformational?
Again, this is my opinion. I don't think it is either or answer. It won't be in two ends of the spectrum. It's going to be somewhere in between. The point where it's an incremental evolution, I think, is stopping, right? There are some exponential capabilities that are coming, like coding for one, and we can talk about that a little bit more as well. Significantly improved over the last 2025 Q4, if you think about it, the calendar year. Suddenly, with models like Opus and all of these GPT Codex 5.4, the coding capability has significantly shot up for these agents. Now, you've got conversations on recently Claude Mythos being released, not given to everybody because it can, like in the security world, it's created a ripple. So again, those are not, I would say, incremental evolutions in the model space itself. So there is significant. But does that significant change in the model and model's capability, the improvement, reflect into a dramatic change within an enterprise? I don't think that's happening yet. And I don't think that is going to happen in 2 years as well, right? I think we will be somewhere in between where there is meaningful change in enterprises, but it happens in a way that enterprises are deliberate about doing it. And I think that's the right way to do. So the way I work, or I think, and if you ask my advice as an enterprise, would be you start to put in changes in a way that in 2 years, when you look back, you've changed your methodology, processes, the people's mindset, the culture itself around leveraging AI for a significant betterment of every processes, but that had not disrupted you in a significant way in the short term. So those incremental changes that you put that enables you in 2 years to get a dramatic advantage, I think is the right way to think about how this should evolve. I do think there will be meaningful improvements in 2 years, but I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as it's being made out in YouTube videos.
No, thank you. That's a very interesting and honest perspective. I want to move on to another topic. I want to talk about the engineering side of things. So outcome forward engineering is very much your framework. For those new to the concept, can you explain the core idea, and specifically what it asks for an engineer that the traditional delivery model doesn't?
Again, it's a very important question, and I'm thankful that you've asked the question. So we've not gone to the market heavily out and started propagating this now. But outcome forward engineering, if you think about what that is as a definition, it's a outcome led approach where AI leads end to end work. So think of a world, and I think genuinely as a technologist, and I apply AI in my day to day engineering activities. I believe in the next 12 to 24 months, give or take, depending on companies, a lot of coding is not going to be done by humans. It's going to be done by AI. So outcome forward focuses on how do you now make your engineers start to think about outcomes that a business wants, and then start to work with AI in a meaningful way to enable generating those outcomes as opposed to just generating code. So today you can go prompt an AI and it'll generate code in no time. But does that code deliver what you want to deliver is the biggest question that people have. And the number of iterations you have to go through to get there is huge. People who've actually used this know this. And the way to get around it is through proper scaffolding, enablement of skills within the skills augmentation for the AI itself, not just the human engineers, and also the skill augmentation for human engineers to be able to do the scaffolding and the skilling of an agent really well. So outcome forward engineering is that practice that we're putting together where we believe most of our engineers will become outcome forward engineers who understand how every line of code that AI is going to generate, that they would be accountable for, meaningfully impacts the outcome that a business wants, that our clients want, as opposed to just taking a design and starting to build. So that's what we're working with on outcome forward engineering, and that's where we think engineers' role will change more from, hey, my team lead asked me go build a bunch of stuff, to I'm an OFA and I understand right from the context to the trust that I need to create in the system for the code that gets deployed, for which I am accountable as an OFA. So that's kind of the perspective with which we are going after OFA.
Very interesting, and potentially, transformative to the way engineering and development is done. I'd like to drill into the impact in a bit more detail, if that's okay. So you've been quite candid about the scale of disruption that this implies for development workforces. So we could well see significant reduction in the number of headcount in certain functions. Is that a projection? Is this something you're already seeing from clients, or something you've already seen in your own delivery operations, or is it something you're expecting to see further down the line?
It is, again, a very interesting question, Mark. Again, there are multiple numbers being thrown by people in terms of what that impact is going to be. And I think I would think of these figures more or less as ones that tend to attract a lot of attention to the topic than the actual number itself. Now, when we think of what that looks like, the disruption looks like, I think we have to be a bit more precise. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. But our opinion on this is there is disruption in engineering. There is going to be headcount reduction. So for the same quantum of work that you can do with AI, you don't need the same number of hours that you need to spend doing it, which then directly reflects into headcount, whatever you want to call it, right? But the way I would start to understand the impact is not just by, hey, I did a POC where I gave a prompt, an agent created a bunch of code, UI looks great. Why do I need so many engineers to go build this? I think you start to now think about the outcome again, which is where outcome forward engineering starts to work. And when you start to think about what you need as an outcome, it includes how critical the business process is that's getting built by the AI, how much of the trust you need on the outcome itself that the AI delivers. When I mean the AI, the code delivers from the business process that's being developed or the product that's being developed. And the trust is both for our customers on the code that we have built using AI, as well as their customers on the product that you have built using AI. So when you put that package together, it's not an even number. We can't walk in and say, hey, we will cut down headcount by 80%. I mean, you could do it for a very trivial. Um, I'm a company where I've got an innovation team that builds ideas and throws away and scales only those that is meaningful. I can cut headcount by 60, 70% because that's a prototyping team. They've iterated at a speed of 10 ideas a month. Today they can do 50 ideas a month, right? That's possible there. But I can't apply the same logic on a financial software that my clients are depending on me, let's say for understanding their financials or the impact of finances on their business. That product can't be iterated at that speed with 80% reduction in headcount. And it also means the pipeline and stuff. So, long story short, I think the disruption is real, but it's uneven. It's very use case specific. And that's what I think our enterprises and our enterprise clients should start to understand. And the disruption is not just in code, it's in the entire pipeline of conceiving an idea to deploying it in production and running it later. And that whole process, and I think there is a genuine TCO reduction that you can start to look at. That will be anywhere between 20 to 40%, depending on where we land.
I think this is a hugely important topic, and it's part of a wider piece about how the IT services industry is disrupting itself and the models on which it's built. And obviously, the revenue model that we've got used to is all about correlating headcount to billable hours. But outcome forward engineering appears to challenge that, as you've just outlined. How does Hitachi's commercial model evolve as a result of this change, and what does it mean for how you price and contract with your clients? Because I'm sure they're going to be asking things like that.
Yeah, and this one I wouldn't say it's an interesting question. It's a pretty tricky question.
Tricky, yeah.
But I think one that all of us have to face head on, right? Being in the service provider industry, I don't think it's one that we can disregard or ignore. Now, the model definitely, Mark, challenges the traditional headcount-based P times Q type of charging models. I think inherently, and we were very deliberate on calling it outcome-forward engineering rather than just using the term like a forward deployed engineer, and we'll put people that will know your business and stuff like that, right? The reason why we went with that is it's becoming more and more clear to us that as this scales, it has to be a value-driven conversation with customers, less about hours-driven conversation with customers. And even customers should start thinking about buying the outcome from providers. That outcome could be an engineering outcome, like building the product within whatever time they need, to a business outcome, as in if there is ability for the provider to support end-to-end processes, then they could build, own, and deliver to an outcome that's a business outcome for a customer, right? So net, again, the idea is this won't be an overnight change, but this is going to be a change that all of us should get used to, both us and the customers, and start to prepare for that, both from their own buy patterns as well, right? So this will be a market push and pull. They also should not continue to buy P times Q and use the same rate cards, whereas we can't continue to go sell headcount to customers. So I think that's where it will converge, and I'm hopeful it will. And we want to be, as Hitachi, in a place where we are talking value and outcomes with customers as opposed to hours and deliverables.
And how do you take your own engineering teams with you? I imagine there's many people there that are concerned, particularly the ones that are going to have their roles displaced.
So I think we, even as a combined entity, which I think we're going to talk a little bit, have a unique advantage in that we are an engineering company by nature, and our people, their mindset is very agile. So I think within Hitachi Digital Services, I don't think there is a big worry about, hey, will it take my job away? To be very candid, everybody is looking to us, our own engineering team, and I say us to some of the work that we're doing in the innovation space on how do they get upskilled to become an outcome forward engineer. And we will be rolling the change management within our own companies over the next months, years, to make sure everybody understands the notion of working with AI assisted coding tools rather than coding by themselves in the new world, and what that means from their own work on how that improves their value to not to become like a developer, but could get more involved in the process itself that defines and delivers the outcome, leveraging AI. Our belief is this is going to give us the ability. So there are two motions in the industry with this. Ideas will become a lot more for our own customers, which means they would want to build more. And the biggest impediment to build more so far has been the investment you need to build more. And that investment typically was in the likes of, I need more people to go write more code to build more products, to add more value to my end customers. And I'm talking about my customers. So when you think about that cycle getting impacted with all of what's happening, there is definitely going to be more products, more ideas, and more value to the end customers that's getting generated. Though on a per product basis or a per project basis, the headcount could come down. The number of projects and products, the sheer number that will go out because the ideas are going to amplify or explode, will keep us at an advantage. That's kind of how we look at the disruption that's happening around us. We don't look at it in a pessimistic way. We're looking at it as an opportunity. And the more we are ready to grab that opportunity, I think our business will scale at speeds that we've even not seen yet.
Thank you for outlining that. I wanted to move the conversation on to physical AI. Now, physical AI is one of those topics that gets bandied around quite a bit, and I think different people mean different things when they're talking about physical AI. So I'd be interested, first of all, to start, what does it actually mean in Hitachi? How do you define it, and how do you make it operationally meaningful?
Physical AI to us is applying intelligence to systems that impact the physical world, not just a digital process, right? That's kind of how we think about physical AI. Now, what's more important for us and more meaningful is that these decisions have real world consequences in terms of safety, reliability, and control. So when you package that into what that intelligence is going to deliver as a consequence, that makes it more physical AI from our perspective, Mark.
Okay. I think it's really interesting talking about physical AI and Hitachi, because the Hitachi group, the wider group, it has this incredible industrial and infrastructure footprint, very different to most other IT service providers. How does that translate into an advantage in physical AI? And can you give us some specific examples?
So physical AI manifestations, for example, from our standpoint, has been in a few scale areas. So one such is HMAX or Hypermobility Asset Expert, which is a space that Hitachi Rail brought to bear. And there's a ton of work that we did on edge compute, edge analytics, and train as a robo, if you talk about HMAX. Similarly, there is work that's happening with physical AI in our building systems. There's work that's happening with physical AI in energy. So what is the advantage that Hitachi has and Hitachi Digital Services has? Like I said in the beginning, we've got access to real data and real use cases that we can touch, feel, and measure impact as our engineers work and build these systems, which is very different from other IT service companies where you technically talk about having the domain knowledge, but really relying a lot more on the customer. For us, One Hitachi is the customer, which means knowledge of operational processes and where physical AI operates at the edge, the real data on which it's operating, is our biggest differentiation compared to other IT services companies.
Okay, I'm just going to drill into that a little bit more, because I think the physical AI does come with a lot of complexity and nuances. I'd be interested to understand the sort of implementation and risk challenges that are genuinely tough in the physical AI space, the ones that you don't get in vendor briefings, but your delivery teams are having to navigate this in the real world.
Yes, and this is a very important aspect, Mark, because as much as everybody can talk about physical AI, it is very cool, and but if you think about the nature of what we are discussing when we say physical AI, is, like I earlier said, the consequences in terms of safety, reliability, and control, right? So the risk is very high in systems where physical AI is getting applied, and especially when you want to do it at scale. So the risk gets amplified when it is frontline worker safety. The risk gets amplified when it is applied in a train and it's making decisions. So it is super important that it is integrated extremely well with an existing set of systems and processes when you apply AI to the physical world. So that's the most challenging part of rolling out physical AI at scale. How do you integrate it with the legacy systems? Because, like I said, physical AI is so physical that the processes and the endpoints that it touches cannot be changed overnight. So there are a ton of legacy systems that have been built over years. Think about factories. Think about, like I said, again, rails or transformers. These are not things that you can just change tomorrow morning to align to AI, like how we're talking about engineering. When I look at the horizons, the engineering changes where I want to change my entire pipeline and scaffolding to a way where AI can actually generate code that can be meaningfully deployed in production is a small change compared to how I change my layout of a factory where worker safety becomes front and center and AI is enabling a ton of that. To get to that means it integrates with my factory environment and equipment. And that change is a challenging change. That integration is a challenging integration. So that's the huge risk and things that physical AI carry. And that's what people have to start thinking about when we roll out physical AI.
That's great. No, thanks for sharing that, Prem. I wanted to move on to the final topic. There's a lot of change within the Hitachi group at the moment. One of the sort of key changes is the coming together of two organizations, Hitachi Digital Services and GlobalLogic. So I think it feels like a good time to talk about the kind of the merger of those two organizations openly. Can you talk us through the sort of strategic rationale, not just what we see in the press release, a bit deeper than that? What does combining these businesses actually unlock that neither of those can achieve on their own?
Yeah, again, I'll give a perspective. Obviously, from a technology angle and as a CTO of one of the group companies that are coming together. Fundamentally, Mark, I think GlobalLogic was a product engineering powerhouse. And if you think about Hitachi Digital Services, we've been an engineering powerhouse with a lot of work around functional aspects of things, be it ERP systems that we are enabling for customers, or be it managed services and the reliability centers that we've built to run large workloads, right? So if you think about where we complement each other, is significant product engineering capability merging with a significant run capability that can enable reliability at scale for customers. Now, the rationale is once you bring these two engineering powerhouses together, you now have an end-to-end, a company that can deliver end-to-end systems. And in the AI world, like I was saying, where the boundaries are getting a lot more collapsed, and we've seen it with DevOps, where everything is trying to come together. But with AI, that's becoming more and more true. So in that world, when we have the capability from conception, design, all the way to deploy and run, it is meaningfully more competitive for us in the market. The second biggest thing that the merger gives us is, as a group company, we've been in the Hitachi ecosystem for over 20 years, like the digital services part. Maybe we changed from consulting to Vantara to now digital services, but we've been with Hitachi. That gives us significant knowledge and grounding in the operational technology space. And with the product engineering capability that's now come in, and they've spent 5 years with the group as well, the cross section of IT cross OT cross product that powers our future and the whole IT cross OT cross product enabled by AI becomes a significant competitive advantage for us. And that's one of the strategic rationales with which we've brought this together. Then the last bit of it is assets. Now, given where the concentration of work has been around product engineering and around run, there have been significant investments that each companies have done independently to build accelerators and platforms that enable frictionless build from the angle of GlobalLogic to a frictionless run from the angle of Hitachi. We call it Velocity AI. That's the brand under which GlobalLogic has a ton of suite or a suite of products that enable build in a way that's fast, seamless, and trustworthy to Hark and Hark related agent products that we have built in digital services that enables taking that build into a run phase that's reliable. And many of these technologies powers our reliability centers today. So when these accelerators and products and platforms come together, it gives us again an unprecedented advantage in terms of enabling an end-to-end solution for customers.
Okay. I want to look at it from the client perspective. If I was a Hitachi Digital Services client, what does this mean for me practically in terms of the capabilities that I can access, or any transition that I should be planning for?
I would tie it back to our outcome forward engineering as well, Mark, a little bit, because I think when we started putting that together, this was in our minds too. The merger gives our customers now the ability to work with a company that's a one-stop shop, right? Previously, again, they had product engineering capability from GlobalLogic, and they may have to go look for somebody else for a run capability. Today, it's all integrated very well. So the notion of build to run can truly be done by one company. Second, this starts to help us enable an outcome-based conversation with our customer, a value-based conversation. Because when you think about a business outcome in reality, it's not about how the idea is built. A business outcome can be achieved only when the idea is built, deployed, and run properly for a customer to generate the outcome that they are looking for. And if they are managing 3 partners to do that, they're not going to get the outcome that they want, or they would not have the ability to keep each partner honest to the outcome. But if it's one partner, then it starts to become easier even for a customer to move towards value as a measure as opposed to hours as a measure, right? And I think that's the biggest advantage our clients are going to get in this merger.
No, thanks for that, and great conversation. We've covered a huge amount of ground. You know, we've talked about agentic AI and physical AI. We've talked about engineering transformation. We've talked about structural changes within the business. I just wanted to wrap things up with one final question. If you had to identify one single thing that will most likely define Hitachi Digital Services in 2 years' time and your position within in the market, what would that be?
I would answer it as a combined company as opposed to Hitachi Digital Services, given in 2 years it would be what it would be.
Sure.
So I think in 2 years, we would be a company that would be able to engineer outcomes rather than outputs. across both the digital and the physical world at scale and with accountability for our customers. And I think that's what we're going for.
Great. Really good talking to you, Prem. No, thank you very much for your time today. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Bye-bye.